So get your comments in. Let us know who else is still an old soldier getting it done at the top level of sport. Do you want to start off with the Waterford Championship? I saw a nice bit of this as well. And I suppose just in terms of what the lineup for the semi-final is, Ballygunner are up against 4 Mile Water. And look, let's call a spade a spade. Ballygunner will be beating 4 Mile Water and they'll be back in the final. Winners of De La Salle, Roanmore. Does that sound a bit dismissive, or is that just realistic? What are they? 55 wins in a row, 54 wins in a row in the championship?
Yeah, something like that. Listen, 4 Mile Water had a real struggle against Conor Prunty's club yesterday. Sorry, just after escaping me there. Abbeyside, yeah. It's just escaped me there for a second. That was a real struggle. Like 15 points to 2-8. And I know there was chaos during the game and whatever. But like, you're going to have to be putting up a serious score to beat Ballygunner. They'll just routinely hit that 20-point mark at club level. I think Roanmore and De La Salle is going to be the first game back in the newly reopened Walsh Park. And I know you saw that video and it was going around on the OurGame Twitter as well. It looks superb.
Yeah.
Like, it looks fantastic. And to be fair, the last couple of times I've been down there, the pitch was never really an issue. I always thought the surface was outstanding, but obviously it's all the other work that they have to do around it. But it looked outstanding. And I kind of said I do think De La Salle, if there's going to be someone to take Ballygunner down, they're probably the most likely. But like, it was routine for Ballygunner, you'd have to say. Routine once again against Dungarvan. Patrick Curran ended up at 1-5, 3 points from frees and that, but they really just had them at arm's length, really, from an early stage, you'd have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching and looking at the team. It's just so ridiculously strong. And like, Ian Kenny was back in the team. He'd been playing Premier Intermediate there up until recently, but he had to go off after about 15 minutes. So like, the last couple of years, we probably haven't seen quite as much of Ian Kenny as people would want us to see. So I'm guessing it's just injury after injury for him. Patrick Fitzgerald just looked, like he's always presenting for the ball. He's winning frees. Now, he only scored one from play, but he looked good at times as well. Obviously, Desi Hutchinson is very hard to nail down. But to be fair to Dungarvan, they didn't allow Ballygunner in to score any goals. It finished 23 points to 11. And when I was watching the game, it was like 6 points to 3 to Ballygunner early enough. I don't know, inside the opening 15 minutes anyway. And Dungarvan had missed a couple of chances, and Kevin Mahoney was just causing them so much bother up at the other end of the field, because you know yourself the way Ballygunner move the ball up the pitch. They're just so precise. They're so composed on the ball. They don't just throw it up and lash it down the field ordinarily. And they were doing lovely crossfield ball for Kevin Mahoney. I think he had a point scored after about 10 seconds of the game. The next couple of balls that came into him, he was able to turn, fire over from different angles. And like, to be fair, for Dungarvan, how many, there's only so many firemen in any one team when you're coming up against Ballygunner. Ultimately, you're going to get picked apart eventually, and it's going to be the same in the semi-final and the final as well, it's kind of frustrating to say that, I'm sure, for a lot of people within Waterford, and even those of us who are watching from further afield. Like, I look at the Tipperary Championship now, and I couldn't tell you at all who's going to win the Tipperary Championship. A couple of weeks ago, I would have said, Killadangan, I think, might win it, and then maybe they will. And now you'd look at the way Thurles played against Borrisley, and it was on TG Carr yesterday, and you think, maybe Thurles are coming. Whereas last week and 2 weeks ago, I was thinking Thurles are at nut. You couldn't say it all. Now, whereas obviously Ballygunner will be an All-Ireland challenger, there might be no All-Ireland challenger out of Tipperary. So there's kind of like, there's the good and the bad of it as well. The same within Kilkenny. Outside of Ballyhale Shamrocks, is there any team in Kilkenny that you would say, if they get out, they'll have a right crack at winning the All-Ireland? Maybe, but at the same time, you couldn't like overly confidently say it.
Yeah, no, the Tip Championship is probably like the Wexford Championship in a sense as well, where you couldn't confidently call a winner. It's very, very competitive, which is great, and there's going to be a lot of games tight, and you can't really predict who's going to win. Whereas on the flip side of it, in Waterford, like, realistically, barring, we're going to have to be a couple of different kind of seismic things are going to probably have to happen for Ballygunner not to do 10 in a row. They have made themselves such a well-oiled machine. As we were talking about on the Thursday show, it's like no player gets to go on a tour de force against them. They just don't get, you know what I mean? Someone playing centre forward or full forward or something like that, they're just not going to get a load of real good ball in space. They're just going to be surrounded. They're going to be kind of suffocated. And Patrick Curran obviously had his moments yesterday, but Ballygunner are kind of so process-driven. Even I believe Harry Ruddle was playing that kind of Barry Nash role, cornerback, first receiver for a load of the puck outs, and was carrying ball out the field. as you said earlier, they're not going to truck ball down. If the ball is going into Desi Hutchinson or Patrick Fitzgerald or Kevin Matney, who is back in the full forward line again, it's going to be lovely ball. It's going to be real sympathetic to the forward. And they put up they put up a good score at their leisure yesterday. But on your question, what's a better championship? You'd have to say the championship where you control blanket over 6 or 7 teams is the more enjoyable championship to watch. While with Ballygunner, you're just thinking, okay, when they play in a Piercing, that's going to be a cracker. If they play Ballyhale, that's going to be a cracker. But they're just a big fish in a pretty small pond at the moment anyway.
Yeah, and then I suppose looking at the other games from the weekend in Waterford, De La Salle beat Clonea 221 to 22 points. And Jack Toomey got a goal early in the game just to kind of set them off nicely. And I suppose they kicked on from there. The other games then, we kind of mentioned 4 Mile Water and Abbeyside. There was like a crazy opening quarter to this game. Michael O'Halloran, he was the first to be sent off early on for taking off James McGrath's helmet. I suppose that's a nice way of putting it, taking off his helmet.
You're just helping it off.
Willie Bursford then got sent off after a bit of a connection with the forwards, we'll say, with Conor Gleeson. Pat Carney, the Abbeyside coach, he was sent off for doing a bit of mouthing at the ref. And then Conor Gleeson got 2 yellows in the space of 90 seconds. Abbeyside nearly stole it. Like, they moved Conor Prunty up to full forward. He won a penalty and scored a goal. Like, isn't that like the class thing about club? Because it's needs must, and you're putting, like, unlike a county team where you have 30 options and, you'll have, I don't know, maybe 12 options for the forwards, 12 options for the back, and whatever for the midfield as well. Here, you're like square pegs, round holes. We need a goal. We can't just bring someone off the bench that's going to be a threat. Okay, Prunty, move up the field there and let's see what happens. You just, like, and I'm sure you've had that with Burr over the years as well, where you're like, okay, we're going to have to move Brian Whelan upfield or, whoever. That these things sort of happen in a way that, it wouldn't really happen at county level so often.
Yeah, no, even I remember back in the day with Offaly, outside of '98 All-Ireland final when he was sick, Brian Whelan was sent up full forward a couple of times in games when they were chasing games, which you just wouldn't see it now. Like a lot of I'd say a lot of people would say it smacks of desperation almost. It's like, oh, the manager's lost the plot and there's a couple of forwards sitting on the line. Why hasn't he brought them in? It's a bit of desperation or whatever. At club level, though, you're just doing whatever you can to try and get a result or get over the line or get competitive. I've seen it a couple of times. I remember Joe Brady for Kildare in 15, I think. Rhinus had them beaten all ends up in a county final. They were much the better team. He went up full forward, got a kind of a scuttery kind of a goal, and they won the county final, and that's all that's kind of remembered in the record books. But you still see it. You're not going to see it with Ballygunner, or you're not going to see it with Ballyhale, shall we say? But in lower end of club, even at senior level, you will still see it because you're just trying to do whatever you can, put the big man up full forward, plant a few balls in there, and see what you can do.
Yeah, because there's very few sports that reward the long ball quite as much as GAA does. So, I remember the Senior B county final a couple of years ago. We were losing St. Finbarrs, and the manager was there on the sideline, and I just said to him, "Well, I go full forward there, so I might catch something or whatever." And he thought about it for a minute, and then he said, "Yeah, go on up." And but then a top level sport as well. I always remember with Chelsea when Mourinho was there the first time, he used to throw Robert Huth up front as well in games. Yeah. He's like the 6'4" defender from Germany or whatever. And just speaking of soccer, and I know you don't watch it that much, did you see Núñez getting those couple of late goals for Liverpool yesterday? That was unreal, to be fair.
I actually did. I was in the Puchin still on the way back getting a bit of grub from Naas yesterday, and the telly was behind me, but there was a lad going absolutely bonkers. And the half kind of Liverpool group that I'm in, because I went on a trip years ago, reckoned it was one of the best kind of steals in a long time. They reckon a draw was a steal, let alone a win being a steal.
Well, there were about 10 men, even from early on in the game, so it was actually unreal to watch. To be fair to them.
Speaking of, seeing as we're gone into segues, how did you end up last night at that concert? Were you happy with the playlist? I know you were disappointed early on.
Yeah, so this is Noel Gallagher now. So I was tweeting, and people have certainly reacted to it. So I was giving out about Noel Gallagher playing all his new stuff. And fair enough, it's a tour for whatever his latest album is. But look, we don't, and I got a free ticket, but we don't pay good money to go and listen to some old new crack that you're after coming out with. Will you start pucking me out, Supersonic?
Yeah.
all the songs that I want from the early day Oasis albums or whatever, and he keeps.
I'd totally be the same. I'd know all the old stuff. Just like, come on, I'm waiting for the old stuff. I'm waiting for the stuff I know here.
Like exactly, like you don't go to, like for example, Man United come to town. Oh, they're crap these days, but like Man United come to town, and you want to see the best players playing. You don't want the B side sent out. You don't want to watch like another thing that I think of there. Do you know Cirque du Soleil? You know that thing?
Oh yeah.
Those amazing shows. So I went to them a couple of times in Vegas, and they're unbelievable. Like they're absolutely unbelievable. And then they came to Dublin, and the girl I was going out with at the time, we'd seen the one in Vegas, and then we said, "Oh, we'll go to this to be class again." Sure, they basically sent over the junior Bs, and they weren't able to do half the stuff at all. Like, and it was.
It's funny you said. I sent the mother and the two sisters to it when it was in Dublin recently, and they loved it. But that's when you're not comparing it to what you've seen before. What was it? I saw a water show version of Cirque du Soleil in the Bellagio.
Yeah.
It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, where the stage just disappears a different stage, and there's basic Olympic standard divers involved in it. It's amazing. If anyone has never been to it, I would recommend it highly. But as you say, go for the senior A one in Vegas, not the junior B one in Dublin.
Yeah, and that brings us lovely back to Roanmore against Mount Sion. But to be Roanmore true, like we've already read the semi-final lineup. Gavin O'Brien, he scored 15 points, 13 of those were frees. Austin Gleeson, he scored 8 points. Bit of I suppose in some ways, a one-man band for Mount Sion. He was starting as the spare man at centre-back. Geez, he just has such a range when he's striking the ball. Now, Mount Sion were playing into the wind in the first half. They were trying to work the ball out from the back, which you totally understand, but they kind of, Roanmore sat off the number 3, I think it was Luke O'Brien maybe, and forced him to be the one to carry it out rather than letting Ozzy getting on the ball and letting him strike from distance. But they were very much penned in from the first half. But to be fair to Mount Sion, they made a fair game of it. And in the second half, Ozzy scored a free from basically his own 21. He was trying to take it from about 25 yards out. There was a bit of jawing with the linesman. He was forced to take it back and knocked it over with the wind, of course, but more or less his own 21. We're gone to that stage now, scoring from the 21.
Yeah, sorry, that reminds me of something. Like I don't know if he gestured to the linesman or anything after, but I'm sure he might have had a word for him after or whatever. But back in the day, we did a sports day in school. I think it was second year, and one of the lads had a very unorthodox way of doing the high jump. And really unorthodox. It definitely wasn't Dick Fosbury's flop anyway. It was a completely different way of doing it. And one of the teachers came over and started giving out to him or whatever. And he jumped this incredible height doing his own style. And he just came over to the teacher and did the DX sucking thing to her after. It was one of the best things I've ever seen. 20 years later, it's still recounted in various WhatsApp groups. I can tell you that.
There, a friend of mine who played for Coola there for a while, Barry Connolly, so he's Joe Connolly's son. He was quite good at sidelines, and there was one match one day he was kind of lining up to take the sideline, and he'd sort of do the thing where he's kind of hunching a little bit before he's about to cut it, and whoever we were playing at the time started saying to him, "Jez, you have a lovely bum with lovely arse," or whatever, this kind of stuff. So they were trying to put him off. He cut the thing over the bar all the same and turned around and said, "I do have a lovely arse, don't I?" or something like that. But look, this is the kind of crack with it too.
But there's nothing better than, and I'd say Owen Kelly got great satisfaction with that penalty as well. When lads are shawing at you, it's a great sign of a lad that they don't, that doesn't affect them at all as well. That they're just able to go and do it, and that's a real kind of, I suppose, single-minded kind of attitude, or that they're just able to block everything out. But there's a great sense of satisfaction when you do something when somebody is riling you up beforehand.
Yeah, just back to that Mount Sion game against Roanmore. Lee Flanagan had a great, young forward, I think it's his first year. He had a great goal chance early on, didn't catch it quite right. I think they had a couple of injuries, including PJ Fanning, so they wouldn't have been at full strength. And the goal for Roanmore, that came when the Mount Sion fullback, he was hooped and Shane Mackey blasted it to the net. Also in that championship as well. Actually, I think we've touched on all 4 games, but in the relegation.
Just on that, Shane, really, I'm surprised that Mount Sion weren't able to work the ball out better, because they had Gerard Cunningham of Newtown Chandram fame when they won the All-Ireland. They had Gerard Cunningham over them for maybe 4 or 5 years, definitely coaching them. And that was all they played, was the short ball, and they always went through the lines. So I don't think he's involved this year, but I'm surprised that they weren't able to adapt to that when Roanmore said, "Go on, you can have it." I thought they'd be able to play out a good bit better than they did. And as you said there were 2 relegation semi-finals as well. Passage had a good win over Lismore. It was 2-17 to 19 points. And Tallow, I think Tommy Ryan is still going strong with Tallow. It ended up 3-19, Dunhill 2-18. So Lismore and Dunhill are fighting for their lives there big time.
Yeah, and actually, Owen Cadigan, he's a coach in Dungarvan. And, at times they did some good stuff in that game against Ballygunner. But look, let's call a spade a spade. Most clubs in Ireland are overmatched when they come up against that team. They're just so strong in all positions. And so as Dunhill looked set to be relegated from senior 2 years in a row, with Ballygunner's B team keeping them up by winning the intermediate again. Doubt they'll want to be senior given the results. And we were kind of saying last week, and apparently we have it on good authority anyway, that if Ballygunner do win the intermediate this year, that they will have 2 teams at senior next year. Wouldn't it actually be a disaster? Let's say they balanced out the 2 panels and put a few of the Mahonys on one team, and Patrick Fitzgerald on one team and Desi Hutchinson on the other. Would they actually be strong enough to have the 2 teams get to the county final?
Oh, what a question. It's like having, you have 35 lads at under 12 and you put in an A and a B team, but it's not an A and a B team. You mix two teams together. Ballygunner will be very strong. Yeah. Now that's some thumb in the eye to the likes of Roanmore and De La Salle. And listen, this clip will probably be playing back, I'd say, over the next 2 days, or maybe before a county final. But they would be very strong. Like Harry Ruddle played intermediate all of last year. Jake Foley played intermediate all of last year. Ian Kenny was playing intermediate up until recently as well. That's the type of strength and depth to have. Just another lad as well, talking about kind of Owlfell is still doing it. Shane O'Sullivan to still be doing it in the position that he's doing it at wing back is some going, because he's gone from the Waterford scene 7 or 8 years at this stage and still performing to a hugely high level for Ballygunner. And he was one of their best probably when they won the All-Ireland final a couple of years ago as well, but he's still fighting the good fight.
Okay, so